I never thought my own son would jolt me out of my chair at our winter dinner, hard enough that I hit the hardwood in front of everyone, just so his father-in-law could take my spot. He didn't know it yet, but that shove in Seattle on December 23rd, 2023, would flip his world inside out. By the time he woke up, there would be 39 missed calls waiting, and not one of them would be a holiday greeting. Name's Samuel Ortega, 66. I built a regional logistics network from one rusty delivery van to a fleet that feeds half the Northwest. My wife, Elena, passed 6 years ago. Since then, my son Lucas had been the axis of my universe, or so I believed. That evening, I arrived at Lucas and Mara's house with a wrapped drone kit for Leo, 14, and a watercolor set for Maya, 11. I also brought a $250 single malt I'd been saving. Their place glowed: pine garlands, warm bulbs, lamb in the oven. The kids sprinted to me, Leo already eye level, Maya looping her arms around my neck. For a moment, life felt simple. Mara's smile was polite, measured, like she was controlling a meeting, not greeting family. Lucas popped out of the kitchen with a clipped, "Hey, Dad," coat on the rack, and went back to plating. I noticed 8 settings on the table, but counted only 6 of us. "Expecting more?" I asked. "Yeah," Mara said, eyes bright but distant. "My father's on his way." Harold Benton, 70, an investor who'd been my quiet rival for years, walked in with the confidence of a man who never waits in lines. And my son, transformed, sudden deference. "Mr. Benton, please. Sit, he said, like a metro to chasing a tip. We moved toward the table. For years, since Elena passed, I'd sat at the head, beside Lucas. Tonight, I took that familiar seat, until Lucas looked at me with a face I didn't recognize. "Dad," he said, voice flat, "I need that chair." "Why?" "It's for Mr. Benton. He's our guest of honor." Silence tightened the room. Mara stared at the salad. The kids froze. Harold hovered with a soft, satisfied smirk. He probably thought no one noticed. "Lucas," I said, steady, "that's always been my place." He didn't answer with words first. He used his hands. A shove. Sudden. Sharp. At 66, balance is a negotiation. I lost mine. The floor rose up faster than pride could catch me. The room gasped. Maya whispered, "Grandpa." Leo's jaw locked. Mara covered her mouth. Harold watched. Lucas said, "That seat's for my father-in-law. Get up." Something inside me didn't break. It reset. I let Leo help me to a side chair, a guest in what used to be my family. Through dinner, I watched my son flatter Harold, watched Mara orbit Harold's opinions, watched my grandchildren study me with confused loyalty. Every bite tasted like tin, and while they talked synergies and market expansions, I planned. Not revenge, correction. Because there are nights when the story you've been living asks to be edited. New names, new roles, new rules. And by morning, edits become consequences that ring and ring and ring. If you're here for stories that twist just when you think you know the ending, tap subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss part 2, and drop a like if you've ever had to reclaim your seat at the table. Tell me where you're watching from. I read the comments. I excused myself with the old man line, restroom, and nobody looked up. Perfect. Behind a locked door and a polite fan hum, I stared at the mirror. The man looking back wasn't broken. He was recalculating. I took out my phone. First call, Priya Desai, my attorney for 2 decades. The kind who reads footnotes and then sues the footnote writer. "Priya, sorry for the hour. Draft it all. Revoke every delegation Lucas has at Ortega Freightworks. Banking authority, vendor sign-offs, contract countersign, everything. And prepare a board notice for a special session at 8:30 a.m. Samuel, that's a lot for Christmas Eve. It's not a holiday where I'm standing. Second call. Nora Kim, CFO. The only person who can find an error in a spreadsheet by listening to it. Nora, put a temporary hold on all joint cards with Lucas's name. Freeze the discretionary budget on his projects. Map every guarantee I've co-signed. There was a pause, a mouse click orchestra in the background. Preliminary, condo on Fremont Avenue, balance around $540,000. Lease on a $95,000 coupe, 2 corporate cards totaling $162,300 in miscellaneous client hospitality. Also, a vendor retainer to a consultant tied to Mara's cousin. Document everything. I'll assume responsibility for cutting guarantees at 10 a.m. Third call. Arturo Salas, Operations Chief. The man who kept our trucks moving through snowstorms and city permits. Arturo, can you be at HQ at 8? I'm already halfway there. Weather's clear. Good. Box up Lucas's office. Badge access off at 9. Draft an internal memo naming you Acting Managing Director, pending board confirmation. He was quiet, respectful. Jefe, are you sure? I'm correcting a route. I stayed in that bathroom long enough to hear the laughter outside swell and fade. When I returned, I sat in the side chair and let their conversation drift over me like elevator music. Pacific corridors are ripe, Harold said, swirling amber in a glass that cost less than his cufflinks. Exactly, Lucas beamed. A merger, Benton Logistics plus Freightworks, could dominate the I-5 spine. A merger, without even the courtesy of a pitch. I filed the word under evidence. When dessert ended, I stood. I'll head out, early morning. Sure, Dad, Lucas said, eyes on Harold, not me. Leo skidded down the stairs in socks just to hug me at the door. You leaving already? Yeah, kiddo. Big day tomorrow. Are you mad? He whispered. I'm awake, I said, and kissed his hair. Outside, Seattle's cold had teeth. By the time I reached my truck, the plan had bones. Back home, I lit the study's lamps and tugged out 4 decades of binders. Bylaws first. I read until the fog on the window turned to frost, and the words I wanted surfaced like coordinates. The CEO serves at the pleasure of the chair. Lucas held no equity, only a title gifted too soon. Nora called at 1:12 a.m. I dug deeper, she said. 2 missed payments on the condo. The coupe lease is past due 8 days. Remove your guarantee and the banks hit immediate demand. Cue the letters for 9:45 a.m. I'll sign at 8:30. Samuel, this will collapse him. Nora, he chose gravity. I'm just removing the mattress. At 2:05, Priya texted drafts, revocations, board notice, termination for cause, breach of fiduciary duty, and loss of confidence, plus a neat packet titled Reversion of Family Loans. For the condo and the car Mara pretended was company property. At 3:20, Arturo pinged a photo of Lucas's office, stripped to drywall and desk. A sticky note in the center. This desk drives itself now. By 5:50, I brewed coffee strong enough to lift steel and reviewed a final spreadsheet. Hidden stipends, quiet vendor rebates, a speaking fee taken under the table. None of it criminal, all of it corrosive. I set the phone to silent. The screen still lit up. Emails, calendar pings, 2 midnight you up. Texts from Lucas that he never sent to me before in his life. Somewhere between a yawn and sunrise, I smiled. Not out of triumph, out of relief. The map was clear. At 8 a.m. on the dot, Priya arrived with a fountain pen and the kind of patience that frightens judges. I signed. Revocations, board session, acting MD appointment, reversion notices, a tidy letter instructing security to switch badges at 9. Another to the banks. I hereby withdraw as guarantor. Once these go, Priya said, there's no rewind button. There never was, I said. We just pretend there is. At 9:02, Arturo confirmed. Access changed. At 9:17, Nora, corporate cards declined. At 9:41, the bank officer I've known since we financed our third truck called to make sure, absolutely sure, I meant it. I mean it, I said. At 10:03, the first domino hit air. Phones don't ring, they insist. And when they do, they don't inquire. They collect. I didn't plan revenge. I planned gravity. Push long enough against a thing, and one day it stops leaning your way. Then it falls. At 10:15 a.m., a new day's light spilled over Seattle's skyline, and somewhere across town, my son's perfect little empire began to fold in on itself. Lucas woke up groggy, not from whiskey, but from ego hangover. Mara was already downstairs making coffee, avoiding eye contact. The smell of burnt toast filled the kitchen. His phone buzzed, screen flashing like an ambulance. 39 missed calls, he muttered. The first was from Evertrust Bank. Mr. Ortega, your mortgage guarantee has been revoked. Immediate payment is due. What? There's some mistake. My father? Yes, sir. That's precisely who removed it. Before Lucas could swallow that, Cascade Credit Union, Horizon Leasing, and City Finance Group called, each one colder than the last. His house, his coupe, his business lines, all circling the drain. By the 10th call, Mara was pale. Lucas, what's happening? It's my dad. He's gone senile or vindictive. I don't know. He slammed his phone down, but it rang again, and again. Each ring pulled another brick out of the castle he'd built on my name. By 11 a.m., he decided to head to the Freightworks tower. I'll straighten this out, he told Mara, grabbing his keys. He didn't realize yet that those keys no longer fit. Downtown, the rain turned the streets slick as glass. He parked his coupe in the executive lot, his last act of ownership, and rode the elevator up to the 10th floor. The building's logo still gleamed, Ortega Freightworks, but only one Ortega still worked there. When the doors opened, he saw Arturo behind the glass office, my old second-in-command, sitting in Lucas's chair. Lucas's nameplate was gone, his family photos boxed in the corner. Arturo, what the hell is this? Arturo looked up, steady, respectful, but firm. Morning, Lucas. You're not authorized here anymore. You're kidding. No, the documents were signed at 8 sharp. You'll find a letter on your desk. Lucas turned, jaw tight, and there it was, a single white envelope, handwritten in my looping script. This seat drives itself now. He ripped it open. Inside was the full letter, official, cold, final, termination, revocation, notice of repossession for the condo and car. The reason stated simply, loss of confidence and ethical breach. Arturo cleared his throat. Security's giving you 10 minutes. You're siding with him? Lucas spat. I'm siding with the man who taught me loyalty doesn't mean silence. Lucas tried calling me, straight to voicemail. He texted, Dad, please call. We can talk. Nothing. He left the building like a ghost, rain soaking his expensive suit. In the parking lot, a tow truck was already hooking his coupe. Wait, that's my car. Not anymore, the driver said, showing the order stamped by Horizon Leasing. Lucas stood there, empty-handed, as his car was hauled away, a symbol of all the guarantees he'd never truly earned. By the time he got home, Mara was on the phone with her father, Harold Benton, voice trembling. When Lucas walked in, she ended the call mid-sentence. "Dad says he wants to meet with your father," she whispered. "He said he's impressed by how decisive Samuel was this morning." Lucas felt the last floor collapse beneath him. "You mean he's partnering with him on the Freightworks Benton merge?" Her eyes welled. "You gave him everything he wanted, Lucas. You just didn't realize it." He slumped into a chair, drenched and silent, as the world he thought he commanded burned quietly around him. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that a family empire had just imploded before lunch. The rain hadn't stopped by the time Lucas reached home. It fell in steady sheets that blurred the Seattle skyline, washing away everything familiar, except the weight of his mistakes. He entered the house to find Mara pacing the living room, phone still in hand, suitcases half packed. The children, Leo and Maya, were huddled on the couch, confused and quiet. Their Christmas decorations, half taken down, half still glowing, cast a mocking light over the tension. "Where were you?" Mara asked, voice brittle. "At the office," Lucas said, wiping his wet hair with his sleeve. "Or what's left of it." She set the phone down with deliberate care. "My father called me. He said your dad came by this morning." Lucas froze. What?" "He thanked him," she said. "He thanked my father for teaching you a lesson he couldn't." Lucas blinked. "That's insane. He humiliated me in front of you. The kids. Everyone." Mara's voice cracked. "No, Lucas. You humiliated him. We all saw it." The silence after that sentence was heavier than any storm. Then the phone rang again, this time the house line. Mara answered, face tightening. Yes, we got the notice." She hung up. "That was the bank. We have 24 hours to vacate." "What?" "The mortgage guarantee's gone. We owe more than $500,000, and they're calling it in. The car lease is revoked, too." Lucas dropped onto the couch, running both hands through his hair. "I'll fix it. I just need to—" "Fix it?" Mara snapped. "How? You've lost your job, the company, our savings. You can't even call your father without his lawyer answering." "Lawyer?" "Yeah, a man named Delgado called this morning. He said any contact from you would count as harassment." Lucas stared at her like she'd spoken in another language. He blocked me?" "He's done, Lucas." Mara's tone softened, but only barely. "And honestly, so am I." The kids looked up sharply. "Mom," Maya whispered. "Sweetheart," Mara said gently, kneeling by them, "you and Leo are going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa Benton for a while." "What about Dad?" Leo asked. Lucas's voice broke. "I'll see you soon." But even he didn't believe it. Mara stood and faced him one last time. "I can't raise them in a house built on arrogance. You didn't just push your father, Lucas. You pushed away the man who taught you everything good you ever pretended to be." He tried to speak, but the words caught like gravel in his throat. Mara zipped the last suitcase shut and turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Lucas." The front door closed softly. The sound was small, but it echoed like thunder. He sat alone on the couch, watching the shadows of his children vanish through the frosted glass. The laughter, the warmth, the illusion, it all left with them. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the downpour. Inside, Lucas stared at his reflection in the window, an image he didn't recognize. He had wanted a seat of power. Now he didn't even have a chair to sit in. The first night alone was the kind of silence that hums in your bones. No TV, no phone, no laughter from the kids down the hall, just the tick of the kitchen clock, marking every regret in real time. Lucas tried to sleep on the couch, still in his damp suit, but sleep doesn't come easy when your mind replays humiliation on a loop. He saw it over and over, the shove, the fall, his father's face when he hit the floor. The shame came not from the memory of what he'd done, but from realizing what it meant. By dawn, the house looked like a museum of everything he'd lost. Half-empty cabinets, toys left behind, the faint scent of Mara's perfume on a scarf. On the kitchen counter sat the eviction notice, cold, factual, final. He spent the morning making calls. Every old friend in business, every connection he'd bragged about for years. The tone was always the same, polite, distant, careful. Lucas, I wish I could help, but you know how things are with your dad. Maybe when the dust settles, call me in a few months. By noon, even those calls went unanswered. His phone finally stopped ringing, not because the crisis ended, but because no one cared anymore. At 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. A man in a windbreaker from Cascade Repossession Services handed him a clipboard. Sign here. For what? Seizure of assets under mortgage termination. Lucas's signature trembled on the paper. The man gave him one curt nod, then began tagging furniture. By evening, he was left with a few boxes of clothes, his laptop, and a $300 cash withdrawal, the last money he could legally access. That night, he found a motel near the industrial district. Thin walls, flickering lights, the kind of place people went when they had nowhere else. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking of his father's last words that night. This seat belongs to my father-in-law. He'd said it with pride then. Now the phrase twisted like a knife. He reached for his phone and opened his contacts, thumb hovering over Dad. He wanted to call, to beg, to explain, but Delgado's warning replayed in his mind. Any attempt at contact will be considered harassment. Lucas set the phone down. For the first time in his life, he had no one to call. The hum of a neon sign outside the window pulsed through the room, casting a dull red glow over his face. He realized he wasn't just broke, he was empty. And emptiness, he learned that night, is louder than any argument. He closed his eyes and whispered to no one, maybe I needed to fall, just to hear how hard it sounds when pride hits the floor. Days turned into weeks. January rain gave way to sleet, and Lucas's world shrank to the size of a motel room and a backpack. The man who once wore tailored suits now lived in thrift store jeans, walking the city like a shadow. Another face in the gray Seattle crowd. When the motel bill finally bled his last $300, he found himself standing at a job board downtown, staring at postings he would have once scrolled past with contempt. Night cleaner, no experience needed. He tore off the tab. That's how Lucas Ortega, former CEO of a multi-million-dollar logistics firm, began mopping floors at Emerald Janitorial Services, working the graveyard shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. His first night, the manager, a stocky woman named Brenda Ruiz, handed him a bucket and gloves. Welcome to the real world, boss man. Floors don't care who you used to be. He smiled weakly. I'm starting to realize that. The first few weeks were brutal. His back ached, his hands blistered, and the smell of disinfectant clung to his clothes. But every time he dragged that mop across the polished marble of office lobbies, he felt something strange, something clean, not just in the air, but inside. Gone were the boardrooms, the fake smiles, the inflated titles. Now his paycheck was small, but his. Every dollar meant hours of real effort, not inherited power. He moved into a shared apartment in Beacon Hill, paying $400 a month for a small room with creaky floors and no view. But it was his space, his start. At night, during his 15-minute break, he'd sit on the rooftop with his thermos of cheap coffee, staring at the skyline. Somewhere out there, his father's office still glowed with the light of men who'd learned how to keep their dignity. Sometimes he'd catch himself whispering, "You were right, Dad." Months passed. Lucas learned to repair floor polishers, manage supply orders, train new hires. Brenda noticed. "You've got leadership in you," she said one night. "The good kind, not the loud kind." He chuckled. "Took me 40 years to find it." Then came the update he never expected. During a phone call with his kids, now living with their grandparents, Leo mentioned it casually. "Grandpa Samuel's working with Grandpa Harold now. They're building some big warehouse near Tacoma." Lucas went still. "Your grandpas are working together?" "Yeah," Leo said. "They said it's the best partnership they've ever had." The irony hit him like a freight truck. The very merger he'd tried to force through betrayal had happened naturally, between the two men who'd seen right through him. That night, Lucas didn't cry. He just sat in the break room after everyone left, staring at his reflection in the window. For the first time in years, he didn't see the spoiled son or the disgraced CEO. He saw a man earning back his soul, one floor at a time. Because sometimes rock bottom isn't the end, it's the foundation. December came again, wrapping Seattle in white lights and drizzle, the kind of cold that reminds you where you've been. It had been exactly 1 year since Lucas's world fell apart. He was still working nights, but things were different now. Brenda, his manager, had promoted him to night shift supervisor. His small apartment was cleaner, neater, even warm. A Christmas card from Leo and Maya sat on his desk, signed in messy handwriting. "We're proud of you, Dad." That night, as he finished cleaning an office on the 20th floor of the Apex Tower, Lucas paused by the window. From up there, he could see the port cranes blinking in the distance, the same shipping routes his father once built from nothing. For the first time in years, the view didn't make him feel envy. It made him feel peace. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was the letter he'd spent 2 weeks writing. Not to beg, not to defend himself, just to say thank you. "Dear Samuel, I know I have no right to your time, your trust, or your forgiveness. I only hope you'll read this, knowing I finally understand. I used to think being your son meant inheriting your success. Now I see it means inheriting your values, if I'm strong enough to live by them. You didn't destroy me that night, Dad. You rebuilt me. Every mop, every long shift, every empty room taught me who I really am. You were never punishing me. You were teaching me. If this letter is all that ever reaches you, that's enough. I just want you to know I'm no longer angry. I'm grateful. Lucas." He sealed it, wrote his father's address, and dropped it into the building's outgoing mail bin. 2 weeks later, an envelope came back. Smaller, lighter, familiar handwriting. He sat on his narrow bed, hands shaking as he opened it. Lucas, I read your letter twice. I'm glad you're well, and that you found what I always hoped you would, yourself. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I am proud of the man you're becoming. Keep going. Dad Lucas stared at those words until they blurred. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. He folded the letter and placed it inside a framed photo of Leo and Maya. For the first time in 12 months, he smiled and meant it, because he finally understood what his father had tried to teach him all along. Success isn't measured by the seat you sit in, but by the person you become when it's taken away. As he left work that night, he walked under the soft glow of the streetlights, the snow settling quietly on his jacket. And for the first time since that terrible Christmas, Lucas didn't feel like the man who lost everything. He felt like a man who had finally earned his life. And if you've followed this story till the end, thank you. If it made you think, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that dig a little deeper, and tell me in the comments, would you forgive him, or would you let consequences do the teaching? See you in the next story.